it is so important for us to help our children feel calm and safe in their body before we can even hope to expect them to be able to be motivated for learning tasks or chores or be willing to challenge themselves outside of their comfort zone. It's just a non starter. You have to handle this first. Hello, and welcome back to Mindshaper SLP. I am Rebecca Robbins, the owner of Mindshaper SLP, where we create fruitful and fulfilling lives for autistic individuals and their families. And if you've been following me the past couple of weeks, you'll realize that I've been talking a lot about motivation and all the different kinds of motivation. And partly that's because I am hosting a course, a 3-week course for parents all about how to facilitate intrinsic motivation in your autistic child of any age and promote independence. And if you have checked out that webpage, you'll notice that we have 3 workshops. The first one is called Stop the Drama, and it's all about how to reduce anxiety and overwhelm in your autistic child. You might be thinking when you see these 3 workshops, Stop the Bribes is the second, and Stop the Nagging is the third. What does Stop the Drama have to do with motivation? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to tell you all about the connection between anxiety and how it can really hinder your autistic child's motivation if you don't address that first, which is why our very first workshop in the motivation map, you can visit this link below to find out more information on how to join. But that's why Stop the Drama is our very first workshop, because it is so important for us to help our children feel calm and safe in their body before we can even hope to expect them to be able to be motivated for learning tasks or chores or be willing to challenge themselves outside of their comfort zone. It's just a non starter. You have to handle this first. So let's just dive right in. Anytime I give a workshop about pretty much on any topic, I always start with teaching this concept that you are going to learn today first, because it is that important. And that concept is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, maybe you've heard of this, maybe you haven't. If you haven't, don't worry. I'm going to explain it to you in the most layman's terms possible today. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist who wrote about human motivation. And he introduced this hierarchy of needs in a 1943 paper that he wrote called A Theory of Human Motivation. And then he later published a book called Motivation and Personality. And in this theory, he states that all humans are born with this innate desire to reach the top of that hierarchy, which is called self-actualization. Don't worry, we're going to go over each of the levels, but basically a drive to fulfill their potential, to be exactly who they want to be, to fulfill their passions. We're all born with that inner drive, according to his theory. However, before we can even think about getting there, there are some other needs that need to be accommodated and taken care of first and foremost. And that is exactly why Stop the Drama is our first workshop in the motivation map. And I'm going to explain that all to you today. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the way it works is we have to fulfill each need starting from the bottom and working our way up to the top. Now, keep in mind, this is not a linear progression. It's not something that if you fulfill the bottom level, that's it, you're set for life. You can work on the next one, that's it, you're set for life, move on to the next one. No, this can change minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, week to week. We can bounce around on this hierarchy, which means that how motivated your child will be to perform a task will always be dependent upon where they're falling on this hierarchy, starting right at the bottom, which is survival needs. This is making sure that our most basic needs to be able to survive, to live, are taken care of, which is we have been fed and watered, right? We have enough food. We have enough to drink. We have air to breathe in our lungs. We have clothing on our body. We have shelter. And now, if you're a teacher in a school, think about those students that come in and maybe their home environment isn't the safest. They're coming into school and we're expecting them to do all of these really challenging tasks when their nervous system is just on high alert because their most basic level on this hierarchy is not being met on a day-to-day basis. So we need to do our part as educators in those circumstances to help them feel that safety when they are in our presence at school. But going back to you as the parent with your autistic child at home, if your child is hungry, if they didn't get enough sleep, if they're thirsty, and even worse, if they can't communicate this to you, but they're melting down, you have to accommodate those needs first before you're going to be able to make any progress or headway on any goal you want to target with them, a chore, homework, whatever it is. We have to make sure that that basic need is fulfilled first. The next rung on the ladder is safety. Your child needs to feel safe in their body. They need to feel safe with the people who are around them, and they need to feel safe in the environment that they are currently in order to be able to focus on fulfilling motivation and being intrinsically motivated. So this is why we have to talk about this stuff first. When it comes to an autistic child, and not just a child, an autistic individual of any age, and we're going to talk about why this really matters even more for an autistic child as I go through this video, but they kind of walk through life on edge because they have dysregulated sensory systems. They have a reduced capacity to take in contextual cues from the environment to predict what's going to happen. They have a reduced ability to take in contextual cues from social interactions to predict how people are going to act and respond to them. All of that makes them not feel as safe in their environment with the people around them or in their body. So we have to make sure that we are addressing sensory concerns. We have to make sure that we are building a rapport with our students. We have to make sure that the environment doesn't feel scary because of sensory overload or loud sudden noises, things like that. So we have to make sure our students, our children feel safe first and foremost before we can even think about targeting anything else. And then we move up. So once we have our kids are fed and watered, they feel safe, we're going to move up the rung to love and belonging. And this is about really having a rock solid relationship with your child. This is probably going to be the easiest part of the rung for you as the parent, right? You love your child, you have a great relationship with them, I'm sure. And as teachers, this is where we really can't skip over the rapport building process with our students. It's something that is very vital. Before we can even think about accomplishing those IEP goals, we have to make sure that we have a rock solid rapport and relationship with our students, because that is something that needs to be fulfilled before that child or student is going to trust you enough to want to access their higher levels of potential and capabilities and learning and motivation. Next, we have self-esteem. So this is something that comes when your child feels a sense of accomplishment or feels competent in doing the things that they do. This is something that in the motivation map workshop, we're going to talk a lot about in the third workshop, the Stop the Nagging workshop, which is all about fostering independence in your autistic child, because the more independence that a child has, the more autonomy a child has, the more they're going to increase their self-esteem. A child has to believe in themselves to want to be able to challenge themselves. If they don't believe in their capability and they don't have that inner sense of confidence or perceived capability or competence to do something, it's going to be really hard to motivate them out of their comfort zone to trust themselves enough. Because when you have self-esteem, you trust yourself, to trust yourself enough to try something hard, to try something difficult. And so once all of those rungs on the ladder or levels on the pyramid are established, then we get to self-actualization, which is where the learning and the motivation and being able to challenge oneself and really, really operate in your zone of genius and fulfill your full potential, your child's full potential. That's where that happens, at that top rung. So you can see how much stuff needs to be put in place before we jump to that spot. And so often we are not filling in those bottom rungs on the ladder before we are expecting children to perform at their highest capacity. And they're still feeling unsafe in their body or dysregulated in their sensory system, or you're still basically a stranger and you're asking them to do things if you're talking about a teacher student relationship. Or maybe it's an extended family member that your child is interacting with and they don't see them that often. And so that rapport and that trust bond isn't there. And so they might be a little bit timid to perform in that scenario because the third level love and belonging is not established firmly with that person because they just don't see them frequently enough. It is really important for us to have an understanding of this and to kind of file it away in the back of our mind so that in those moments where our kids might be melting down, or maybe you're working on a task or an activity with your child that typically they can do no problem, they are acing it, but for whatever reason, it is causing them to melt down today. That is a good indicator that you have to kind of step back and think about, okay, what need is not being met right now, that they're not able to do this thing that normally they're able to do so easily. This is especially important when we're talking about a non-speaking individual who cannot tell us what's going on inside of their body and cannot communicate their needs, or if they're in pain, or if they don't feel good, or if they're hungry, or if they're thirsty. It is even more important for us to know these things so that when things aren't going the way that we had hoped, or the way that we had expected, or the way that they usually do go, we, as the adult doing the work and knowing these things, we can take a step back and say, you know what? I think something's going on here. Okay, well, he just ate, so he's probably not hungry. Maybe, those chips were pretty salty. I can't remember the last time he had something to drink. Let me offer him some water. And maybe he was just thirsty. Or maybe he has a stomach ache from what he just ate. Or maybe there's some sort of sensory experience happening and they're not feeling safe. He or she is not feeling safe in their bodies. So you kind of have to be a detective. But when you have this understanding of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it kind of helps you be able to take the emotion out of a situation, because when your child is having an emotional reaction, of course it's going to impact you emotionally. You don't want your child to feel upset, but it helps us remove ourselves emotionally from the situation so we can think constructively to help calm your child so that they can get back to a place of being able to perform at their full potential or achieve their full potential. So this is true, just a little caveat. This is true for all people. It doesn't matter if you have an autistic child, a neurotypical child. It is true for adults, children alike. This is a theory of human motivation. But these principles matter even more when we talk about the autistic population, because anxiety and autism are so closely correlated to each other. I have some stats here that I pulled from a website called autistica.org.uk. I'll go ahead and put that in the resource section of the notes, the description for this video. Here are some statistics that they have on their website about autism and anxiety. 2 in 5 autistic people are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, 2 in 5. But many more will experience symptoms of anxiety that affect how they live their life. So 2 out of every 5 autistic people are struggling with anxiety, but it's probably even more than that. That's just the people that have reported their anxiety. Anxiety disorders affect 42% of autistic children, as compared to just 3% of children without autism. That is a staggering difference. And that's almost half of the autistic population. So if you know someone with autism, odds are that they also have a high level or a high risk for potential anxiety in their life, which means that we really have to do our work to learn how to help them manage their anxiety, to teach them coping skills, to help calm their bodies so that the anxiety does not become debilitating to their life. I have a cousin who is very, very capable, but his anxiety is so crippling that he is actually not able to really go out of the house and socialize or hold a job. And he certainly has the intelligence and the capability and the potential to do so, but the anxiety is so crippling for him. This is a real thing. We need to address it, which is exactly why my first workshop in the motivation map is teaching you all about how to do this. Mental health issues affect 79% of autistic adults. 79% of autistic adults, and many don't even get the help that they need. That is another staggering statistic. This is why we have to know about anxiety. We have to know about anxiety management, and we have to work on teaching our kids and our grown sons and daughters coping skills to help manage their anxiety. I'm a huge fan of mindfulness activities and mindfulness approaches. I've used them with many of my students, kids, teens, adults, and they work. And they are really great, and they really do help calm the nervous system. I also have some other tips and tricks that I'm going to teach you and stop the drama that will really help you navigate your child's anxiety and meltdowns much more easier, to the point that you can probably prevent the meltdowns in the future over time. When we're talking about the anxiety, this is really the level of safety on Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we're targeting here. So remember, the bottom level is like basic survival needs. Make sure your humans are fed and watered. They have, shelter, they have clothes on their back, they have shoes on their feet, that. But the next level is safety. And when you have anxiety in your body, you do not feel safe in your body. This is something we're going to cover and stop the drama. When your nervous system is triggered with anxiety, your brain feels like whatever the situation is causing the anxiety, whether it truly is life-threatening or not, it's sending the message that this is life-threatening to me. That's the level, the perceived sense of danger that's happening in your child when they feel anxious and when they are on edge and when their nervous system is triggered. So this is why we really need to have ways to help our kids cope with this so that they don't have to feel that way. Because when your nervous system is triggered, your only responses are fight, flight, or freeze. Whereas when your body is calm and you're feeling safe in your body, your environment, with the people around you, the part of your brain that can make logical, wise choices, that is in control. But when your nervous system is activated, that goes offline, and your child is never going to be able to access their full potential if they're constantly operating in a state of fight, flight, freeze, and they're just ultra vigilant all the time. One of the first books we read in my autism book club was Uniquely Human, A Different Way of Seeing Autism by Barry Prezant. And right off in the beginning of the book, he talks about how he believes that one of the core defining features of autism is a disability of trust, he calls it. And he says autism can best be understood as a disability of trust. Because of their neurological challenges, people with autism face tremendous obstacles of three kinds: trusting their body, trusting the world around them, and most challenging of all, trusting other people. When it comes to trusting their body, we're talking about that sensory piece of if a child feels sensory dysregulation in their body, or also a very common co-occurring condition is apraxia, which is a motor planning disorder, which means that they might be trying to tell their body to move in a certain way, but it does something completely different. How can you trust your body if it doesn't do what you want it to do? We heard a lot about that in the book we read, In Two Worlds by Ido Kedar. He's a non-speaking autistic author, and that was a work of fiction that he wrote. In that book, the boy had such a severe motor planning difficulty that he just could not get his body to do what he wanted to do, to the point that his teachers would continue to work on the same targets time and time again in school, even though intellectually inside his brain he knew it, but he couldn't get his body to demonstrate that he knew it. That is what we're talking about with a disability of trust and difficulty trusting your body. The sensory piece, not being able to move your body on command, trusting the world around them. People with executive functioning difficulties often have a difficult time taking in the context cues of the environment around them. And it is through doing that that we're able to predict what's going to happen next. So we don't get startled as much. But if you can't do that and everything just seems to happen randomly, that is going to make you distrust the world around you and distrust the environment you're in because you never quite know what to expect. And distrusting other people was the third aspect. Same thing with the social cues. 70% of what we communicate is nonverbal communication when we're socializing with other people. And if you have a disadvantage of being able to understand that, then you're really not picking up on so many of the cues, having a hard time understanding social cues or reading between the lines. What makes you not know how to read other people accurately. Unfortunately, so many people with disabilities get bullied. And so when you have a history of being bullied from the time you're a kid all the way up through adulthood, that makes you distrust other people. So when you have that perfect storm of not trusting your body, not trusting your environment, and difficulty trusting other people, can you imagine how that makes you feel unsafe in your body and heightens your anxiety? This is why it is so important for us to know these things and know theories like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and to know how to calm your child's sensory system and how to teach your child coping skills, no matter their support needs. Even a child that is non speaking and is highly sensory dysregulated can still learn coping skills, can still learn to calm their body. And it might be the person that is with them that helps to initiate whatever it is that strategy is to help calm them. But it is possible no matter the ability level of the person that you're talking about or the support needs of the person that you're talking about. That is why it's the first thing we're tackling in the Motivation Map workshop starting June 3rd. Registration is open until May 31st. It's a 3-week course aimed towards parents. What I just talked about in today's video just scratches the surface of what we're going to talk about in Stop the Drama workshop. And not only are you going to learn some important principles and theories like we did today behind all of this stuff, but I'm going to give you practical strategies that you can implement with your child right away. You're even going to get handouts that are print and go so that you can use the strategies right away. And I talk about how you can use it for younger kids and for older kids and adults as well. And then in week 2, we're going to talk about stop the bribes. Once we've talked about how to establish safety in your child's body, we're going to take those bribes away and talk about how to intrinsically motivate your child from the inside in a way that honors their neurotype. That's week 2. Week 3, we're going to talk about stop the nagging, which is all about fostering independence in your autistic child, no matter their age. And we're going to talk about 2 foundational independence principles that you need to know. We're going to talk about my favorite communication strategy, declarative language, which I'm going to be making a video about very, very soon. And we're also going to be talking about easy to implement practical strategies that you can use to help lead your child from dependent on you towards independence, because ultimately that's what we want. We want for our kids to be as independent as possible as they grow up to be adults. And it's part of my mission to help everyone create fruitful and fulfilling lives. The Motivation Map workshop is one of the ways that I am using to help fulfill that mission for Mindshaper SLP. So please join us. Again, here's the link. We start June 3rd. I can't wait to see you in there, and I will see you soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends. Bye.